Hello everyone, amateur meteorologist FirstinWeather here. It is November 10th, 2019, and today I will be discussing the risk for snow in the lower portions of the Mid-Atlantic on Tuesday, and then I'll be going into a broader discussion for the long range and the pattern for the next couple of weeks or so. So let's get right into the video. This here is the GFS 18Z run. This is the valid for 18Z Tuesday, and so as you can see, it's trying to show this pretty potent Arctic front, and this will be what's delivering that big shot of cold air for the eastern part of the country. However, this shot of cold air will be very short-lived. It looked like previously these extreme temperature anomalies of 10 to 20 to maybe even 25 degrees below average would last for a few days. Now it looks like this is going to be a quick one and done type of deal. We're going to have these really cold temperature anomalies for 1 to 2 days at most. And this is what we see right here, a very potent Arctic front with that low right here, the snow on the backside wrapping around as that cold air encroaches on the system. And then potentially right around here, some snow on the backside. And the main risk for that is essentially north of the Virginia-North Carolina border, where you can see some snow on the backside of the system as the cold air comes in. And once this front crosses the mountains right here, the model essentially removes all chances of snow, rain transitioning to snow, as the mountains essentially take out all the moisture in the system and really just have the moisture ahead of the front, really leaving no cold air to work with. However, in the past few runs, we have seen the reintroduction of the possibility of a few flakes mixing in. And this chance goes up exponentially as you get farther north. For example, north of DC, a few snow showers at the end of the front is looking like a good bet. The main question is, what about in Virginia? And so in this video, for the first part, I'll be focusing on this area right here, and whether these areas can see their first shot of cold, or their first shot of snowflakes. So, if we go further down, this is the ECMWF, and this is the 12Z run, and it's essentially showing the same thing. It has that front, that low right here, that front like this, and so, or more like that. And the European is showing essentially a mix, a rain to mix change for this area for a couple hours on Tuesday. So there is some model agreement that we could see a little bit of wet snowflakes mixing in at the end of the system for the Virginia Commonwealth area. And this is the sounding for the NAM 3-kilometer model, which is the high-resolution model. And this is valid for 15Z, and this is for the city of Richmond. And as you can see, there's some very strong winds aloft. So that's one thing. That's what happens when you have an Arctic cold front. And if we look at the sounding, we can see the surface temperature is 38 degrees. So that cold air has not made it to the ground yet. And if we go up, we can see very shortly, right around 950, 925 millibars, we reach the freezing point. And so we stay at or below freezing almost for pretty much the entire time. And so that indicates that if that precipitation is falling heavily enough, and with those strong winds here, some of that colder air here could get dragged down and we could have some snow showers from big, fat, heavy, wet snowflakes with temperatures several degrees above freezing. So it's definitely a possibility. However, one thing I want to note is, historically speaking, with these changeover systems, especially in November and in March, climatologically speaking, that cold air always arrives slower than expected. So if the model is showing an unfavorable sounding at best right now for seeing a good couple hours of snowfall, then I think the chance of actually seeing a changeover to a few snow showers is very low, maybe around 20 to 30%. But I do think the chances get higher for, as some of those raindrops are falling, for 1 or 2 snowflakes to fall in here and there for Tuesday. And this is the ECMWF temperature anomaly for Wednesday. As you can see, this big blob of temperature anomalies that are anywhere from 20 to 25 degrees, even 30 degrees below average. High temperatures in Virginia will be in the 30s, with low 30s, in fact, stretching to the northeast, and maybe even some upper 20s. So again, very cold air for this time of year. This is a very impressive Arctic air mass this early in the year, and we have all that air coming in right in from the northern portions of Canada, the polar sources. So definitely a very cold air mass for this time of year. Now, the GEFS, or the GFS ensembles, has sort of been hinting at sort of a pattern breakdown as we go after this week. And this is for Tuesday, November 19th. And as you can see, they're still hanging on to a little bit of below average temperature anomalies for this area, but essentially the entire country is more of a zonal flow with ridging in the west, and then that jet stream kind of flattens out here, not really having anything too noticeable east of the Mississippi. And this is also supported in the EPS. This is for November 20th, ridging in the west, and then some more just basic, more zonal flow in the east, nothing really too extreme. But I do want to note that this is at the end of that model, that ensemble model. And so if there is even the slightest of a cold signal at the end of an ensemble run, that is actually pretty significant. So the GFS here, which is not really at the end of its run, the GFS is having more of a warm signal for the east, while the European is still hanging on to a cold signal for the eastern half of the country. And so now that you have this discrepancy as to whether this pattern will break down after this week, as to whether we will continue to see those shots of cold air, I definitely don't think we're going to see another Arctic air mass that's going to come this week. But I do think there is debate right now as to whether we will stay in this generally below average pattern for the east with repeated shots of cold air and warm days for a couple of days, and then we get back to a few days of below average temperatures, or whether we see more of a very volatile pattern where we just see cold days, warm days, and maybe more warm days than cold days with more of a zonal flow. So I think it's time to look at some of the teleconnections and other variables. This is the MJO forecast. And so as you can see right now, we're in phase 6 actually, and so we're projected to go very quickly into phase 7, 8, and then 1 and 2. And so to be in phases 8, 1, and 2, that's favorable for troughing in the east. And as you can see, it's pretty well outside the circle right here, so it's a good indication. The MJO being this far out of the circle in phases 8, 1, and 2, it's a pretty good signal that we could be seeing troughing and below average conditions in the eastern part of the country as we head out after the 15th and 16th. But as you can see, one thing that I want to note is after the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th, when the GFS ensemble and GFS wants to break down that pattern, see how it's kind of making it go into the circle and then go right into phases 4, 5, and 6. And so that sudden abrupt turn to go straight into 4, 5, and 6 right here, that kind of is a sign to me that the model is trying to initiate, or the MJO is sort of favoring a breakdown of the pattern as we go into this latter half of November. And we're going to stay below average in terms of temperature anomalies all the way to the 20th at least. But then after that is when things get murky. And as soon as that time period hits, see these things these lines all turning, and then an abrupt change to phases 4, 5, and 6, and these are unfavorable for cold weather in the east. Phases 4, 5, and 6 are all about warmer conditions in the east, cooler conditions in the west. So this is definitely very interesting to see that sudden abrupt change, and I think this is definitely a signal that we could be seeing cooler than average conditions persisting in, or cooler than average conditions sort of eroding down as you go past the 20th of November. Now here's the Arctic oscillation. So this is another mixed signal, because now the Arctic oscillation is projected to stay in its strongly negative phase over the next few days. So this directly conflicts with the MJO, so we'll have to see which wins out. But I do think that's why there is so much uncertainty right now as to whether we will stay in this cool pattern or go into a more cool / warm or slightly warm biased pattern for the end of the month, because you have these conflicting signals for sure in terms of the MJO and AO. And so here's the GEFS ensemble. What it's trying to show that's causing the pattern breakdown is, this is for November 22nd. You can see we have a big low over Alaska and a high right here, and that's essentially making the Pacific jet stream very, very strong, very narrow. It's racing right here, and then it sort of has a split flow. You have a trough right here, and the jet stream going like this. And so this is essentially delivering warm, mild Pacific air into the entire country. There's not really any cold air coming in from the north. And so that's why the GFS is showing that pattern breakdown. So it remains interesting to see if that AO, which is projected to stay strongly negative for the next couple of weeks, will sort of change the GFS ensemble's mind on what is going to happen after November 20th. And one thing to also note is the ensemble models and the CFS and all these other forecasting models have consistently been having a warm bias over the past few weeks, where they predict above average conditions or temperatures, and then as we get closer and closer, they start trending cooler and cooler until they're showing below average conditions. So this is definitely interesting to watch. I'll definitely be updating you guys on what it's looking like for the end of the month, and I'll also be having my final winter forecast by the end of November, so stay tuned for that. And so that pretty much sums up this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.